CPUs are experiencing a remarkable era right now with budget processors from both AMD and Intel matching and even beating out flagship models from just a couple years ago. The thing is though that budget is subjective and not everyone can afford brand new options. But all is not lost for them because the second-hand market is undoubtedly in one of the best eras it's been in for a while, with high core count CPUs available for less than you might think. I mean, this might just be the best value second-hand processor you can get right now, and it's only $10. The Intel Xeon E5 1650 V3. Now I know to many of you, I just said a bunch of random numbers. Well, you're not alone my friend, as I didn't understand what Xeon CPUs were either, until I happily stumbled down the rabbit hole that is AliExpress PC parts. You see, the Intel Xeon E5 1650 V3 is a part of Intel's E5 V3 series, which was introduced in 2014 and is based on the Haswell microarchitecture. Now this particular processor was designed for workstations and entry-level servers, offering a balance between high performance and cost efficiency. It was widely adopted in professional environments that required robust computational power like 3D rendering, scientific simulations, enterprise-level applications, and other just boring and expensive machines. But nobody cares about that, because we're going to use this thing for gaming. Now, from my understanding, the E5 16V3 is not a very subtle rebrand of the i7 5930K. In my opinion, it's one of the best Xeons for gaming. But I will say that their model numbers are basically unintelligible compared to AMD's easier naming system or even Intel's I series naming. But if you find yourself sources of information like the Tech Power-Up or Intel's very own ARC website, you'll start to notice that some of Intel Xeons are very similar to the chips in the i3, i5, and i9 lineup. Obviously, there are some differences here and there, with the major difference being the different sockets, harder to overclock. The biggest one, the Xeons are much cheaper. And the reason why processors like the Intel Xeon E5 1650 V3, such a long name, are often available at lower prices is tied to the business practices of the companies that lease workstations. You see, large companies and enterprises typically lease their workstations for their employees under multi-year agreements. Now, once that ends, these companies then return the workstations back to their suppliers in exchange for newer models. Now, those returned workstations are then disassembled with the components such as the CPU being recycled. These salvaged CPUs are still fully functional and powerful, but they're also now being resold at much lower prices compared to brand new chips. Since they come from workstations in bulk that no longer meet the latest requirements of that company, these parts flood the secondary market. This allows enthusiasts like us and small business and individual users to purchase these CPUs at bargain prices. And that's how we can now buy this one for $10. I just gave you guys a really boring history lesson on this CPU, but let's talk specs. Because the E5 1650 V3 features 6 cores and 12 threads, thanks to Intel's hyper-threading technology. It has a base clock of 3.5 GHz and can turbo boost up to 3.8. It also supports DDR4 memory, which comes in handy when you want to build a close to modern build, and it comes with 15 megabytes of L3 cache, contributing to its strong multi-threaded performance. It's built on Intel's 22 nanometer process technology and uses the LGA 2011-3 socket, which was common for Intel's Haswell E and Haswell EP processors. The LGA 2011-3 socket is not a socket that you'll find on many motherboards, so finding a motherboard for this CPU, you'll have to go on AliExpress or eBay to find some really budget ones, usually made by Chinese companies like Machinist. And that leads me straight to where we're gonna put this beast of a CPU. I've gone with the LGA 2011-3 Micro ATX motherboard from Machinist. A white motherboard because why not? Make this build look clean while keeping it dirt cheap. See, this board is actually one of the best value options for LGA 2011-3 CPUs. And at just $54, in my opinion, it's a steal. The real kicker? I got it off eBay and it took only 6 days to arrive, which is crazy fast for a Chinese motherboard, considering AliExpress shipments can have you waiting for more than 2 weeks. Functionally, it's a solid motherboard. I mean, it has full support for DDR4 memory, which is what we're going to be using for the build. It also has an M.2 slot for high-speed storage if you plan on upgrading the storage later down the line. But most importantly, it actually supports our quirky Xeon CPU. And yeah, it's not an Asus ROG motherboard with all the fancy VRNs and RGB headers. But let's be real, you're building a $300 PC. This is the motherboard that you would need. When it comes to storage, we're just going to be keeping things real simple here. It's not going to be an M.2 SSD, but actually it's going to be a SATA SSD. I'm just dropping things all over the place. We're going with Silicon Power's 512GB SATA SSD. It's fast enough for gaming, reliable, and best of all, it's only $26 on Amazon, so you could get this next day. If you're doing massive file transfers or editing, however, then you might want to consider getting an NVMe SSD, because those are just faster and better suited for those tasks. But for pure gaming and having solid Windows boot times, this drive is going to get it done for dirt cheap. SSD prices are always fluctuating, so if you see a better deal from, say, Team Group, Crucial, or Kingsbet, just snag it. Don't overthink it. This was just the best option at the time. And that leads me to my RAM, another best option at the time. It doesn't have any fancy heat sinks or anything. It's just 16GB of DDR4, 2x8, 3200 MHz. You know, it's another Amazon steal for just $21, and I'm not concerned about the RAM overheating. That's never been an issue for me, especially if you're not overclocking. And in my opinion, 3200 MHz, 16GB is the sweet spot for gaming. And at this price, you really can't go wrong. In my opinion, if you're gonna be running DDR4, 16GB, 2x8, 3200 MHz, you should never be paying more than $32, at least in today's market, and it's been like that for a while. So make sure to check around different options to make sure that you're not overspending on your memory. What's going to be cooling this funky CPU? Good question, because that's going to be this guy right here. Now, our Intel Xeon is a powerhouse, but it also has a TDP of 140 watts. So we need a cooler that won't let it burn up like a cheap pre-built from Amazon. I went with the up here P4C CPU air cooler. And yes, it is compatible with LGA 2011-3, so no issues with compatibility there. Now this cooler provides plenty of thermal headroom for the Xeon, and in my opinion, it looks pretty decent too. All black design, smoothed out at the top so you don't see all the radiator fins, and more importantly, it keeps our CPU from turning into a fire hazard. In my opinion, that's always a plus. Now when it comes with the case, I'm going with the Okinos Aqua 3 Micro ATX. If you've been following my builds, you already know that I love this case. I mean, I used it in the last video. And I've used it for over 40 PC flips. People love this style with the fishbowl design, plus the RGB fans come built in with the controller. For just $68, you're getting front glass and side glass, 3 pre-installed RGB fans already wired and ready to go, and you're getting more than enough GPU clearance for anything you plan to be putting on a budget build. And we'll be needing that GPU clearance for our steal of a graphics card. Back to the case though. In my opinion, it's just one of the best looking cases at the price point. I also love the front I/O on the side rather than the top or the actual front. It makes it perfect for users that like to put their PCs on their desk, making it easy to access and perfect for those desk setups. And now, this is the moment you've been waiting for, the GPU. I've managed to score a GTX 1080 Founders Edition for just $80 on Facebook Marketplace. Yeah, you heard that right, $80. In my opinion, even in 2025, this card is still a beast. It has 8GB of VRAM, can handle modern titles at 1080p and even 1440p, and blows away anything that you would find at this price point. It just holds up incredibly well. You know, yes, the 50 series is out, but do you really need to be spending that much money on some AI generated frames? No, for me, budget GPUs always have a place in my heart. And if you're looking for a GPU on a budget, always check Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, or eBay, because you'll be shocked at how many people are selling great gaming cards, just like this 1080 Founders Edition, for dirt cheap. Especially with the release of the 50 series line of GPUs from Nvidia. Everyone's now selling their older ones, flooding the secondhand market, making it so that people like you who are looking to get a good deal can get that good deal. Just look around, just do some research. Again, Facebook Marketplace, that's the place to check. Finally, powering all of this is gonna be the Thermaltake Smart 500 watt. I picked that up for just 39 bucks on Amazon, prime shipping and everything, and in my opinion, 500 watts is more than enough for this build. Thermaltake is a trusted brand, and I've been using their budget-friendly PSUs for years, and have never had any issues with them. Now I agree that you shouldn't cheap out on a power supply, but if you can find a reliable one like this one for under 40 bucks, it's an easy win. So yes, don't cheap out on power supplies, find trusted brands. Now, let's build this thing. First things first, install the CPU into the motherboard. Make sure to line up the triangles unless you enjoy bending pins. Next, seat the RAM into the DIMM slots, and yes, click it all the way, unless you want to spend 20 minutes troubleshooting why your PC won't boot. That's been me before, by the way. Install the SSD, then mount the motherboard into the case. Route the front I/O cables, arguably the most annoying part of any PC build, then put the GTX 1080 into the motherboard, lining it up with the PCI slot. Cleanly route all your PCU cables, and finally install Windows. That wasn't a full coverage of how to build a PC step by step, and there's plenty of resources online. Remember, if you don't want to pay $100 for a Windows license, you can either find a cheap key online or just use the free unactivated version. It's literally the same thing. Well, the build turned out completely well. Not only does the PC look great, but it also performs amazing. It blew away my expectations. Once I got the PC up and running with all the proper drivers and Windows installed, I installed 3D Mark to run one of the most well-known benchmark standards out there, TimeSpy. And after running this $300 PC through TimeSpy, it scored a whopping 6,967. Let's convert this to real numbers in games that you know. 125 plus in Battlefield 5. 140 plus in Apex, 155 plus in GTA, 85 plus in Red Dead Redemption 2, and a whopping 230 plus FPS in Fortnite, all at high settings. And the best part, Temps stayed cool the whole time. The CPU never exceeded 46 degrees, and the GPU topped out at just above 78 degrees. Frosty performance all around. For just $300, this build can handle all of the latest games with ease. So there you have it, the best $300 gaming PC that you can build right now. If you've been struggling to put together a budget build, this is one of the best options available today. And if you have a little extra cash, here's what I'd recommend. I would recommend that you look at upgrading the GPU to possibly an RTX 2060 or a 1660 Super. Both of them are great options, just depends on the budget. Getting a better power supply. If you plan on overclocking either the GPU or the CPU, it could also give you more headspace for any future upgrades. And finally, adding that M.2 SSD on the motherboard would increase your storage as well as give you faster load times for anything that you just want to load up quicker. But for just $300, this is insane. What a deal that holds up even in 2025. Anyways, that's all I have. Goodbye now.